Patricia Moore stood in her small repair shop, her hands covered in grease as she worked on an old radio. The morning sun came through the dusty windows, creating patterns of light on the wooden floor. She was 52 years old, with gray hair tied back in a practical ponytail and sharp green eyes that had seen too much. The radio crackled to life, and she smiled slightly. Another thing fixed, another small victory. This was her life now, in the quiet mountain town of Millbrook. She fixed toasters, repaired lawnmowers, and sometimes helped neighbors with their broken washing machines. It was simple work, honest work, and very different from what she used to do. 10 years ago, Patricia had been a military engineer. She had worked on advanced defense systems, designing technology that was supposed to protect soldiers and civilians. She had been good at her job, maybe too good. Her team had created a new automated defense system called the Guardian Protocol. It was meant to identify threats and respond with perfect accuracy. But nothing was perfect. Patricia remembered the day everything changed. She had been at the military base, reviewing some routine reports, when the emergency call came. The Guardian Protocol had malfunctioned during a field test in a conflict zone. The system had identified a civilian convoy as a threat. The response had been automatic and devastating. Nobody died, thank God, but many people were injured. Families lost their homes. Children were traumatized. The international incident that followed was a nightmare. Patricia and her team had designed fail-safes, backup systems, layers of protection. But someone higher up had modified the system, removed some of her safety protocols to make it more efficient. When it went wrong, the blame fell everywhere, including on her. Patricia had testified at the military inquiry. She had explained her design, shown how the modifications had led to the failure. Officially, she was cleared of responsibility, but officially didn't matter to her conscience. She had created the foundation of that system. Her work had hurt people, even if indirectly. She couldn't sleep at night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the news footage of that damaged neighborhood, heard the cries of scared children, imagined the pain of injured civilians. It didn't matter that it wasn't entirely her fault. She had built the tool that caused harm. 6 months after the incident, Patricia resigned from the military. She couldn't work on defense systems anymore. She couldn't trust that her work wouldn't be misused again. The military offered her counseling, tried to convince her to stay. Her colleagues said she was overreacting, that these things happened in war zones, that she shouldn't blame herself. But she did blame herself, and she needed to get away. Millbrook had been a random choice. She had looked at a map of small towns far from military bases, far from big cities, far from her past. Millbrook was in the mountains, population about 2,000 people, surrounded by forests and old mining trails. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where life moved slowly, where the biggest excitement was the annual Harvest Festival. Patricia had bought a small house on the edge of town and opened her repair shop. She called it Moore's Fix-It. The name was simple and functional, like her new life. People in town were curious about the newcomer at first, but Patricia kept to herself. She was polite but distant. She fixed things and went home. She didn't make friends. She didn't want to get close to anyone. The bell above her shop door rang, pulling Patricia from her memories. Tom Fletcher walked in, carrying a broken coffee maker. Tom was in his 70s, a retired teacher who lived 2 streets away. He was one of her regular customers, always breaking something or other. "Morning, Patricia," Tom said with a cheerful smile. "Got another patient for you." The coffee maker decided to retire before I did. Patricia wiped her hands on a rag and took the coffee maker. "Let me see what I can do." Probably just a loose wire. "You're a miracle worker," Tom said. "I don't know what this town did before you arrived." "They probably bought new things instead of fixing old ones," Patricia replied, examining the coffee maker's base. Tom laughed. "True enough." but there's something satisfying about keeping old things running, don't you think? Everything has value, even if it's broken. Patricia looked up at him, wondering if he meant more than he was saying. But Tom just smiled his gentle smile and promised to come back later in the week. After Tom left, Patricia returned to her workbench. The shop was cluttered but organized in her own system. Shelves held spare parts, tools hung on pegboards, and a calendar on the wall marked the few social events she actually attended. She had created a small, controlled world here. Nothing unexpected, nothing dangerous, nothing that could hurt people. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Sarah Lynn, a young mother who lived in town with her 2 children. Sarah's dishwasher had broken last month, and Patricia had fixed it. Since then, Sarah had been persistently friendly, inviting Patricia to community events and sometimes just stopping by to chat. The message read, "Patricia, there's a town meeting tonight about the old dam. They say there might be problems. You should come. Your engineering knowledge could help. See you at 7 p.m. at the community center." Patricia stared at the message for a long moment. The old dam. She knew about it, of course. Everyone in Millbrook knew about Clearwater Dam. It was built in the 1960s, located in the mountains above the town. It provided water for the valley and some hydroelectric power. It was old, but supposedly maintained by the county. She texted back a simple reply. "I'll think about it." But she probably wouldn't go. Town meetings meant crowds, meant questions, meant potentially getting involved. And Patricia didn't get involved anymore. She fixed small things in her shop and kept her distance from everything else. The rest of the morning passed quietly. Patricia repaired a laptop that wouldn't start, replaced a fan belt on a lawnmower, and cleaned the contacts on an old stereo system. Each repair was a small puzzle, a problem with a solution. That was what she liked about this work. The problems were clear, the solutions were definite, and nobody got hurt. At lunchtime, she closed the shop and walked to the small diner on Main Street. The town was quiet today, with just a few people walking around. Millbrook had one main street, with shops, a post office, a library, a medical clinic, and the diner. Everything else was residential streets spreading out toward the forest. The diner was called Betty's Place, though Betty had retired years ago and sold it to a younger couple. Patricia ordered her usual sandwich and sat in a corner booth away from other customers. She brought a technical manual with her to read while she ate, a habit that discouraged conversation. But today, someone interrupted her reading. Dr. Helen Chen sat down across from her without asking. "Hi, Patricia," Helen said. "Mind if I join you?" Patricia did mind, but she was too polite to say so. Of course. Dr. Helen Chen was the town's primary physician, running the medical clinic with one nurse and a part-time physician's assistant. She was in her early 40s, competent and caring. She had tried several times to become friends with Patricia, with limited success. "Did you hear about the dam situation?" Helen asked, ordering coffee from the server. "Sarah mentioned something," Patricia said carefully. "It's concerning," Helen continued. "Apparently, the county inspection last month found some issues with the control systems. The dam is old, and with all the rain we've had this season, there's worry about the water levels. The county is sending engineers to assess it, but the town council wanted to have a meeting to keep everyone informed." Patricia felt a familiar tightness in her chest. Engineering problems, systems failures, potential disasters. This was exactly the kind of thing she had left behind. "I'm sure the county engineers will handle it," Patricia said, focusing on her sandwich. Helen looked at her thoughtfully. "Patricia, I know you don't talk about your past, and I respect that. But Sarah mentioned that before you came here, you were some kind of engineer. If that's true, maybe you could help. Maybe you could look at the dam systems, give a second opinion." "No," Patricia said, more sharply than she intended. "I'm not that kind of engineer anymore. I fix small things now. I don't work on large systems. But I said no, Helen. Patricia stood up, leaving money on the table for her half-eaten sandwich. Excuse me, I need to get back to the shop. She walked out of the diner quickly, her heart beating fast. The familiar feeling of panic was rising in her chest. Just thinking about large-scale engineering problems made her remember that day 10 years ago, the calls coming in, the realization that her system had failed, the knowledge that people were hurt because of something she created. Patricia walked back to her shop and locked the door behind her. She sat in her workroom, trying to calm her breathing. This was why she had come to Millbrook: to escape, to avoid these situations, to never again be responsible for anything that could hurt people. She picked up Tom's coffee maker and focused on the repair: simple, controllable, safe. That evening, Patricia stayed home instead of going to the town meeting. Her house was small and comfortable, with a workshop in the garage where she worked on larger repair projects. She had a garden in the back where she grew vegetables, another simple task with clear results. She tried to read a book, but her mind kept wandering. She wondered what they were saying at the town meeting. Was the dam really in danger? How old were the control systems? What kind of maintenance had been done? Stop it, she told herself. It's not your problem. The county has engineers for this. Her phone buzzed several times with messages from Sarah and Helen, but she ignored them. She took a long shower, made herself dinner, and went to bed early. But she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about dams, about control systems, about what could go wrong. She knew too much about engineering to ignore the potential dangers. Dams were complex structures with multiple failure points. Control systems could malfunction. Safety protocols could be inadequate. At 2 a.m, Patricia got up and made tea. She sat at her kitchen table and finally opened her laptop. She hadn't looked at engineering documents in years, but she still remembered how to access public records. She searched for information about Clearwater Dam. The dam had been built in 1962, primarily for irrigation and flood control. It was 63 years old. It had been upgraded in the 1980s with new spillways and in the 1990s with automated control systems. The most recent inspection report, which was publicly available, noted that the control systems were functional but aging and recommended monitoring and eventual replacement. That phrase made Patricia's stomach twist. Functional but aging was engineering speak for, it works for now, but we're not sure for how long. And eventual replacement meant it was on a list somewhere, probably a long list of infrastructure projects waiting for funding. She found more details about the control systems. They were SCADA systems, supervisory control and data acquisition, common in infrastructure like dams and power plants. The systems monitored water levels, managed spillways, controlled gates, and provided warnings if something went wrong. But SCADA systems from the 1990s were primitive by modern standards. They had limited redundancy, simple sensors, and basic programming. They were also vulnerable to age-related failures, corrosion, software glitches, and weather damage. Patricia closed her laptop and rubbed her eyes. Why was she doing this? It wasn't her responsibility. She had left this world behind. But she couldn't stop thinking about it. Millbrook was built in the valley below the dam. If the dam failed, if the control systems didn't properly manage water levels during the heavy spring rains, the entire town could be flooded. 2,000 people lived here, families with children, people like Tom and Sarah and Helen. No, she told herself firmly. The county will handle it. They have professionals. You don't need to get involved. She went back to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. The next morning, Patricia opened her shop at the usual time. She was tired. Her eyes felt gritty from lack of sleep. But she pushed through. Work was a distraction. Work was safe. Sarah came by mid-morning with her daughter Emma, who was 7 years old and curious about everything. Patricia, Sarah said cheerfully. You missed the town meeting last night. It was quite interesting. I was busy, Patricia said, not looking up from the vacuum cleaner she was repairing. The county engineers are coming next week to inspect the dam thoroughly, Sarah continued. But they said it might take a while to get funding for any major repairs. The town council is setting up an emergency committee just in case. Emma wandered around the shop, looking at all the tools and parts with wide eyes. What are you fixing? She asked Patricia. A vacuum cleaner, Patricia said. The motor is making a strange noise. Can I watch? Emma asked. Sarah smiled apologetically. Emma, don't bother Patricia. She's working. It's okay, Patricia said, surprising herself. She can watch if she stays back from the tools. Emma's face lit up, and she carefully sat on a stool near the workbench, watching intently as Patricia tested the motor. There was something about the child's honest curiosity that reminded Patricia of why she had become an engineer in the first place. She had loved figuring out how things worked, solving mechanical puzzles, making broken things whole again. Why does it make that noise? Emma asked. The motor bearings are worn, Patricia explained. When metal parts rub together for a long time, they get damaged. The noise is the damaged parts vibrating. Can you fix it? Yes. I'll replace the bearings. Then it will run smoothly again. Emma watched in fascination as Patricia carefully disassembled the motor, removed the old bearings, and installed new ones. When Patricia tested the vacuum cleaner and it ran quietly, Emma clapped her hands. You made it better, Emma said happily. That's what I do, Patricia said with a small smile. Sarah paid for the repair and thanked Patricia. As they were leaving, Sarah turned back. Patricia, the town council is looking for volunteers for the emergency committee. They need people with technical knowledge. I really think you should consider it. I'm not interested, Patricia said flatly. Sarah looked disappointed but nodded. Okay, but if you change your mind, the sign-up sheet is at the community center. After they left, Patricia stood in her quiet shop, thinking. She was being selfish, she knew. If she really had knowledge that could help keep the town safe, shouldn't she offer it? But every time she thought about getting involved with large-scale engineering again, she felt that familiar panic, the weight of responsibility, the fear of failing. The day continued slowly. Patricia worked on various repairs, losing herself in the simple mechanical problems. But in the back of her mind, she kept thinking about the dam, about control systems, about what could go wrong. That afternoon, Tom came back to pick up his coffee maker. Good as new, Patricia said, demonstrating that it worked. You're a wonder, Tom said, paying her. Then he looked at her seriously. Patricia, I've lived in this town for 45 years. I've seen a lot of changes, a lot of people come and go. I can tell when someone is running from something. Patricia stiffened. I don't know what you mean. I'm not asking you to tell me your story, Tom said gently. Everyone has a right to their privacy. But I want you to know something. Whatever happened in your past, whatever you're afraid of, you're a good person. I can tell. The way you work, the care you take with every repair, the patience you showed with Emma today. That's who you really are. Patricia felt tears prickling at her eyes, but she blinked them away. Thank you, Tom. And if you ever want to talk, Tom continued, or if you ever want to help this town in a bigger way than fixing coffee makers, we would be grateful. No pressure. Just know that we value you. After Tom left, Patricia sat down heavily on her stool. She felt torn between two parts of herself. One part wanted to stay hidden, stay safe, never risk causing harm again. The other part, the part that Emma's curiosity had awakened, remembered why she had become an engineer. To help people, to solve problems, to make the world a little bit safer. That night, Patricia did something she hadn't done in years. She opened the box she kept in the back of her closet, the box with her old work materials. Inside were notebooks filled with designs, reports from her military projects, and at the bottom, a commendation she had received before everything went wrong. She looked at the commendation, reading the words about her exceptional dedication to protecting lives through innovative engineering. That had been her goal once, before the Guardian Protocol, before everything went wrong. Patricia sat on her bedroom floor, holding these pieces of her past, and cried. She cried for the career she had lost, for the trust in herself that had shattered, for the 10 years she had spent hiding. She cried until she was exhausted, until no more tears would come. Then she put everything back in the box, except for one notebook. It was her design journal, where she had always worked through complex engineering problems. The pages were filled with diagrams, calculations, and notes in her own handwriting. She opened to a blank page and started writing. Not about the Guardian Protocol, not about the past. She wrote about Clearwater Dam. She listed what she knew about SCADA systems from the 1990s. She noted the common failure points for aging infrastructure. She drew diagrams of typical dam control systems and marked the critical components. She wasn't committing to anything, she told herself. She was just thinking through the problem, just keeping her mind sharp, just in case. Just in case.
Patricia stood there as the sun set, watching water flowing through the spillways, listening to the constant roar of water. Downstream, invisible from here but only a few miles away, was Millbrook, her home now, the place where Tom and Sarah and Helen and little Emma lived. She drove back to town as darkness fell, her mind churning with thoughts she couldn't silence. On Friday morning, Helen came to the shop. She wasn't there for a repair. She was there to talk. "Patricia, I need to be honest with you," Helen said. "The county engineers came yesterday. I was at the town council meeting last night." "And?" Patricia asked, though she could tell from Helen's expression that the news wasn't good. "The control systems are failing faster than expected. The recent heavy rains have stressed the dam. The engineers said they need to order replacement parts, but it will take weeks, maybe months. They're monitoring the situation, but if we get another major storm before the repairs are done, the automated systems might not be able to handle the water levels properly." Patricia felt ice in her stomach. "What does that mean?" "It means potential flooding. It means the dam might not fail completely, but it could overflow in uncontrolled ways." The engineers tried to explain it, but honestly, most of us didn't fully understand the technical details. The bottom line is, we're in a waiting period, and everyone is nervous. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. "What do they want me to do?" "The town council knows you're an engineer." Sarah told them, "I hope you don't mind. They want to know if you would be willing to look at the control systems, maybe provide a second opinion. The county engineers are good, but they're stretched thin. They have 10 other dams to monitor. You're here. You know the town. And frankly, Patricia, people trust you." "They shouldn't," Patricia said bitterly. "They don't know me." "We know what you show us," Helen said. "We know you're careful, skilled, and you care about doing things right. That's enough." Patricia turned away, looking at the cluttered shelves of her shop. All these small repairs, all these simple problems. How had she thought this would be enough? How had she thought she could hide forever? "I can't promise I can help," Patricia said quietly. "I don't work on large systems anymore. I might make things worse. Or you might make things better," Helen said. "Patricia, I'm a doctor. I understand about mistakes, about fear of making the wrong call. But I also understand that sometimes, when someone needs help, you have to try, even if you're afraid." Patricia looked at Helen and saw genuine concern in her eyes, not just for the town, but for Patricia herself. "I'll think about it," Patricia said. "That's all I'm asking," Helen replied. After Helen left, Patricia locked the shop door and put up a closed sign. She went home, made coffee, and sat at her kitchen table with her notebook. She opened to the pages where she had been sketching out the dam's control systems. She thought about what Helen had said. Sometimes you have to try, even if you're afraid. She thought about Emma's curious eyes, watching her repair the vacuum cleaner. She thought about Tom's words. You're a good person. That's who you really are. She thought about the guardian protocol, about the pain she had caused, even indirectly, about the 10 years she had spent trying to atone by doing nothing, risking nothing, helping no one beyond small repairs. And she realized something. Running away hadn't healed her. Hiding hadn't made the guilt go away. She was still carrying the weight of the past, still afraid, still broken in her own way. Maybe it was time to try to fix herself, not just toasters and coffee makers. Patricia picked up her phone and called the number Helen had left for the town council chairman, Marcus Webb. Mr. Webb? This is Patricia Moore. I heard you might need someone to look at the dam's control systems. I'd like to help. There was a pause on the other end, then Marcus Webb's relieved voice. Miss Moore? Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Can you come to an emergency council meeting tomorrow morning? 8 a.m. at the community center? I'll be there, Patricia said. After she hung up, she sat in her quiet kitchen, feeling terrified and determined in equal measure. She had just stepped back into the world she had fled. There was no guarantee she could help, no guarantee she wouldn't fail again. But she had to try. That night, Patricia did something else she hadn't done in years. She called an old colleague from her military days, Dr. James Mitchell. James had been on her team, one of the few people who had understood why she resigned. They had stayed in touch sporadically over the years, though Patricia had kept even him at a distance. Patricia? James answered, sounding surprised. It's been a while. How are you? I'm okay, Patricia said. James, I need to ask you something technical about SCADA systems for dams. James was silent for a moment. You're working on engineering again? Maybe. There's a situation here. An old dam with failing control systems. I said I would look at it. Patricia, that's great. I mean, if you're ready. Are you ready? I don't know, Patricia admitted, but I have to try. Can you help me understand current best practices for emergency repairs on aging SCADA systems? For the next 2 hours, James walked her through technical details, sent her reference materials, and offered to consult if she needed more help. He was encouraging without being pushy, supportive without making her feel pressured. Patricia, James said before they hung up, I'm proud of you. I know how hard this must be. I haven't done anything yet, Patricia said.
You've decided to try. That's something. After the call, Patricia spent the rest of the night studying. She reviewed SCADA system architecture, common failure modes for aging equipment, emergency repair protocols, and safety procedures. She filled pages of her notebook with diagrams and calculations. She worked until dawn, fueled by coffee and nervous energy. When the sun rose, she was exhausted but focused. She had a plan. It might not work, but she had a plan. At 7:45 a.m., Patricia arrived at the community center. It was a simple building that hosted town events, meetings, and celebrations. Several people were already there, including Marcus Webb, Helen, Sarah, Tom, and a few others she recognized as local business owners. Ms. Moore, thank you for coming, Marcus said, shaking her hand. He was in his 60s, a retired school principal who now spent his time on town council business. We really appreciate your willingness to help. The county engineers arrived a few minutes later, 2 men in their 40s wearing casual work clothes. They introduced themselves as Daniel Torres and Mike Sullivan. They looked tired, like they had been working too many long days. "You're the local engineer?" Daniel asked Patricia. "I used to be," Patricia said carefully. "I'm willing to look at your assessment and see if I can offer any insights." The meeting began with Daniel and Mike explaining the situation in detail. They had charts showing the dam's water levels, graphs of stress measurements, and photographs of the aging control equipment. The pictures showed corroded sensors, outdated control panels, and frayed wiring. "The main issue is the SCADA system," Daniel explained. "It's original equipment from 1992. It's held up remarkably well, but we're seeing increasing errors in sensor readings and delayed responses from the control mechanisms. With the heavy spring runoff we're expecting, the system needs to respond quickly to adjust water flow. If it fails at a critical moment, we could have uncontrolled water release." "What's your timeline for repairs?" Patricia asked. "We've ordered replacement components," Mike said. "But they have to be custom-made to integrate with the existing infrastructure. We're looking at 6 to 8 weeks. "And the next major storm system?" Marcus asked. "Weather Service says possibly next week," Mike replied grimly. "Maybe sooner." The room was quiet as everyone absorbed this information. 6 weeks until repairs, maybe 1 week until a storm. The math wasn't good. "Can you implement temporary measures?" Patricia asked. "Manual overrides, backup systems?" "We can station someone at the dam for manual monitoring," Daniel said. "But the manual controls are also old. Response times won't be as good as a properly functioning automated system. And we'd need someone who really understands the system, who can make quick decisions." Patricia looked at the technical specifications they had brought. She studied the diagrams of the control system, comparing them to what she had researched. Something nagged at her, a pattern she recognized from her own work. "Your SCADA system uses distributed sensor networks, right?" Patricia asked. "Yes," Daniel confirmed. "And the sensors communicate through a central processing unit?" "That's right." Patricia pointed to a section of the diagram. "This is your bottleneck. You have redundant sensors, but they all feed through this single processor. If that processor is failing, which these error logs suggest, then even your backup sensors won't help. The data isn't getting processed correctly." Daniel and Mike looked at each other, then back at the diagram. "You're right," Mike said slowly. "We've been focused on replacing the sensors, but the processor is the real issue." "Can you replace just the processor?" Patricia asked. "Not easily," Daniel admitted. "It's integrated with the entire system. We'd have to reprogram everything, and that takes time we don't have." Patricia stared at the diagrams, her engineering mind working through the problem. There had to be a solution, some way to work around the failing processor, some temporary fix that could keep things running until proper repairs could be made. "What if we bypass the central processor for critical functions?" Patricia suggested. "Set up a temporary parallel system that handles just the essential controls. Water level monitoring and spillway adjustments. Keep it simple, keep it manual if necessary, but remove the failing processor from the critical path." Daniel frowned, thinking. Actually, that might work. We'd need to wire it up, set up the parallel processing, program some basic automation. It would be a temporary patch, not a real fix." "But it would keep us safe until the real repairs are done?" Marcus asked. "Potentially, yes," Mike said. "But it would take someone with real expertise to set it up, someone who understands both the old system and modern control theory, and they'd need to work fast." Everyone looked at Patricia. She felt the weight of their expectations, their hope, and felt that familiar fear rising in her chest. This was what she had been afraid of: being responsible, being needed, having the chance to fail again. But she also thought about Emma, about Tom, about all the families in Millbrook, about the 2,000 people who lived here and didn't deserve to be flooded because she was too scared to try. "I can do it," Patricia said quietly. I can set up the parallel system, but I'll need help, and I'll need access to the dam's control room. Daniel looked at Mike, who nodded. We'll provide whatever support you need, Daniel said. But I have to be honest, Ms. Moore. This is risky. If the temporary system fails, or if there's an error in the programming, things could get worse instead of better. I know, Patricia said, but doing nothing is also risky. Marcus stood up. Then it's decided. Patricia, you have the council's full support. What do you need? For the next hour, they made plans. Daniel and Mike would provide access to the dam and detailed system specifications. They would also arrange for some basic equipment and supplies. Marcus would organize volunteers to help with whatever Patricia needed. Sarah immediately volunteered. I'm a high school math teacher, she said. I don't know engineering, but I can follow instructions, and I'm good at problem solving. I can help with logistics, Tom offered. Supplies, food, whatever you need. Helen raised her hand. I'll be on standby in case anyone gets hurt. Patricia, you'll need to be careful up there. The dam is a dangerous place. Patricia felt overwhelmed by their support. These people barely knew her, but they were willing to trust her, willing to help her. It was both humbling and terrifying. Thank you, Patricia said. All of you. I'll do my best. After the meeting, Patricia went home to prepare. She made a detailed list of equipment she would need, drew up plans for the parallel control system, and reviewed every technical specification Daniel and Mike had provided. She worked through the afternoon and into the evening, making sure she understood every aspect of what she was about to attempt. At midnight, she finally allowed herself to stop. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the next few days. She thought about the Guardian Protocol, about her failure, about the weight she had carried for 10 years, and she thought about what Tom had said. Whatever happened in your past, whatever you're afraid of, you're a good person. That's who you really are. Maybe it was time to believe that. Maybe it was time to trust herself again, not blindly, but carefully, to take precautions, to work methodically, to do everything possible to avoid mistakes, but to try. Patricia closed her eyes and, for the first time in years, slept peacefully. Chapter 4. The challenge begins. Early. Saturday morning, Patricia drove up to Clearwater Dam. The road was steep and winding, cutting through dense forest. As she climbed higher, she could see Millbrook spread out in the valley below, a small collection of buildings surrounded by green fields and trees. It looked peaceful and vulnerable. At the dam's access gate, she met Daniel and Mike. They looked even more tired than they had the day before, but they greeted her warmly. "Ready to see what we're working with?" Daniel asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," Patricia replied. They drove across the top of the dam, and Patricia felt a slight vertigo looking down at the water on one side and the steep drop on the other. The dam was about 500 feet long and 200 feet high, a massive structure of concrete and steel. Water thundered through the spillways, a constant reminder of the power being held back. The control room was built into the dam structure itself, accessed through a heavy metal door. Inside, it was cool and humid, with the constant background roar of water muted but still present. The room was filled with old equipment, control panels with analog gauges, computer terminals with green monochrome screens, and racks of electrical equipment that looked like they belonged in a museum. "This is the SCADA system," Mike said, gesturing to the main control panel. "It monitors water levels, controls the spillway gates, manages the hydroelectric turbines, and sends alerts if anything goes wrong." Patricia studied the system carefully. It was exactly as old as she expected, but it was also more complex. The engineers who had built this had done good work, given the technology available in 1992. There were redundancies, safety systems, and manual overrides. But time and corrosion had taken their toll. "Show me the central processor," Patricia said. Daniel opened a panel, revealing a box of circuit boards and wiring. Patricia could see corrosion on some of the connections, and several indicator lights were showing error conditions. This processor handles all the sensor data and makes decisions about spillway adjustments, Mike explained. It's starting to give inconsistent outputs. Sometimes it works fine, sometimes it gives wrong readings, sometimes it doesn't respond at all. Patricia took photos with her phone, documenting everything. She traced the wiring, identified the key connections, and made notes in her notebook. She was in her element now, her mind fully engaged with the technical puzzle. "Here's my plan," Patricia said, sketching a diagram for Daniel and Mike. "We set up a parallel processing system using modern microcontrollers. We tap into the sensor feeds before they reach the old processor, process the data independently, and send control signals directly to the critical systems. We'll keep the old system running for non-critical functions, but for water level management and spillway control, we use the new parallel system." "Can you build that?" Daniel asked. "Yes. I'll need some specific components, but they're all commercially available. I can order them online with overnight delivery." "What about programming?" Mike asked. "I'll write the code. It will be simple and robust, with multiple safety checks. If there's any doubt, the system will default to manual control and send an alert." Daniel nodded slowly. "It might work. But Patricia, this is still a significant risk. You're essentially building a critical control system from scratch in a few days." "I know," Patricia said. "That's why we'll test everything thoroughly. And why we'll have someone monitoring the system 24/7 until the permanent repairs are done." They spent the rest of the morning going through every detail of the plan. Patricia identified exactly what equipment she needed, what software she would write, and how they would test the system before activating it. By lunchtime, she had a complete project plan. Sarah arrived with sandwiches and coffee. She had brought Emma, who stayed in the car during the technical discussions, but waved excitedly at Patricia through the window. "How's it going?" Sarah asked. "Complicated, but manageable," Patricia said. "I'm going to need help running cables and mounting equipment. Are you available tomorrow?" "Absolutely," Sarah said. "Emma's dad will watch her." "I'm here for whatever you need." Tom also arrived, bringing boxes of supplies that Daniel and Mike had requested from the county. He took one look at the old control room and whistled. "I taught history for 30 years, but even I know this equipment is ancient." "Ancient but functional," Patricia said with a slight smile. "We're just giving it some help." That afternoon, Patricia returned home and immediately started ordering equipment online. She spent nearly $1,000 of her own money on microcontrollers, sensors, power supplies, cables, and other components. She arranged for overnight delivery to the Millbrook post office. Then she started programming. She set up her laptop with the necessary development software and began writing the code for the parallel control system. She wrote carefully, methodically, adding comments to explain every function, building in safety checks at every step. The code needed to do several things: read data from water level sensors, calculate the current load on the dam, determine optimal spillway settings, send control signals to the spillway motors, and alert operators if anything went outside normal parameters. It sounded simple, but there were dozens of edge cases to handle, potential failure modes to anticipate, and safety protocols to implement. Patricia worked through the evening and late into the night. She was tired, but her mind was clear and focused. This was what she had trained for, what she was good at. She felt something she hadn't felt in 10 years, the satisfaction of doing meaningful work, of using her skills to solve important problems. At 3 a.m, she finally stopped. The basic code was complete. Tomorrow she would test it, refine it, and prepare for installation. But for now, she had done enough. She slept for a few hours, then woke early to review her work. In the morning light, she found a few small errors and corrected them. She ran simulations on her laptop, testing the code against various scenarios, normal operation, sensor failures, extreme water levels, power fluctuations. The code performed well, defaulting to safe modes when it encountered unexpected conditions. Sarah arrived at noon to pick her up. They drove to the post office where Patricia's equipment packages had arrived. They loaded everything into Sarah's van and headed up to the dam. "Are you nervous?" Sarah asked as they drove. "Terrified," Patricia admitted, "but you're doing it anyway." "That's brave." "Or stupid," Patricia said with a weak smile. "No," Sarah said firmly, "it's brave. My kids are counting on you. This whole town is counting on you. And I think we chose the right person." At the dam, they met Daniel and Mike again. Patricia unpacked all her equipment and began organizing it on a workbench they had set up in the control room. She explained her plan in detail, showing them the code she had written, the equipment she would use, and the installation process. "I'm impressed," Mike said, reviewing her code. "This is clean, well-documented, and conservative in its assumptions. It's exactly what we need." "When can you start installation?" Daniel asked. "Tomorrow morning," Patricia said. "I want to do one more day of testing and preparation. This has to be perfect." That evening, Patricia went home exhausted but satisfied with the progress. She reviewed her plans one more time, looking for any flaws, any overlooked details. She found a few minor improvements to make and updated her code. Her phone rang. It was Helen. "Patricia, I heard about what you're doing at the dam," Helen said. "The whole town is talking about it. People are grateful." "I haven't done anything yet," Patricia protested. "You showed up. You stepped up. That's something." "Patricia, I know this must be hard for you, bringing up your past. But I want you to know, whatever happened before, you're doing the right thing now." "I hope so," Patricia said quietly. "Have you eaten today?" Helen asked with a doctor's concern. Patricia realized she hadn't. She had been too focused on work. "I'll take that silence as a no," Helen said. "I'm bringing you dinner." "You can't work on an empty stomach." 20 minutes later, Helen arrived with Chinese takeout. They ate together in Patricia's small kitchen, and Helen gently asked about Patricia's past. Patricia found herself for the first time talking about the Guardian Protocol, about what had gone wrong, about the guilt she carried, about the 10 years of hiding. Helen listened without judgment, without offering easy reassurances. When Patricia finished, Helen was quiet for a moment. "Patricia, I see patients die sometimes," Helen said finally. "I'm a good doctor, but I can't save everyone. I've made mistakes, missed diagnoses, chosen wrong treatments. Each time I've had to decide whether to quit or keep going. I keep going because more people will die if I quit than if I keep trying, even with the risk of more mistakes." "It's not the same," Patricia said. "It's exactly the same. You have skills that can help people. Yes, things can go wrong. Yes, you might fail, but more people will be hurt if you do nothing than if you try and fail. That's the burden of expertise, Patricia. It's not fair, but it's real." Patricia thought about this. "I'm scared of failing again." "Good," Helen said. "Fear makes you careful. Fear makes you double-check your work. Fear keeps you humble. It's only when you're not afraid that you make reckless mistakes."
They finished their dinner, and Helen left. Patricia sat in her quiet kitchen, thinking about Helen's words. She realized that she had been treating fear as something to avoid, something that proved she shouldn't be doing this work. But maybe fear was actually a tool, a guide to being more careful, more thorough. She spent the rest of the evening reviewing her plans one more time, this time specifically looking for things she was afraid might go wrong. Each fear, each worry, she addressed with an additional safety check, an extra test, a backup plan. By the time she went to bed, she felt as ready as she could possibly be. Monday morning arrived with dark clouds gathering over the mountains. The weather forecast called for rain later in the week, possibly heavy rain. The timing was bad, but there was nothing to do except move forward. Patricia arrived at the dam at 7 a.m. carrying her equipment. Sarah was already there, along with Tom and 2 other volunteers from town, both retired electricians who had offered to help. "We're your crew," Sarah said with a determined smile. "Tell us what to do." Patricia organized them quickly. She showed them the diagrams she had drawn, explained which cables needed to be run, where equipment needed to be mounted, and how everything would connect together. The retired electricians, Bill and George, understood immediately and started mapping out the physical installation. "This will be a long day," Patricia warned. "We need to run cables, mount the new control boards, connect all the sensors, and then test everything thoroughly before we switch over from the old system." "We've got all day," Tom said, "and coffee." Daniel and Mike arrived, and the team got to work. Patricia took charge naturally, directing the work with clear, precise instructions. She had Sarah help her program the microcontrollers, teaching her enough about the code to serve as a second pair of eyes for catching errors. Bill and George ran cables through the dam's maintenance passages, mounting junction boxes and terminal blocks. Tom handled logistics, making sure everyone had the tools and materials they needed, running down to town when they needed additional supplies. By noon, they had made good progress. The new control boards were mounted in protective enclosures next to the old system. Cables were run from the sensors to the new controllers. Patricia had programmed all the microcontrollers and was testing them individually. They took a lunch break, eating sandwiches that Tom had brought from Betty's diner. Everyone was tired but energized by the progress. "You're really good at this," Sarah said to Patricia. "You're a natural leader." "I'm just an engineer," Patricia protested. "You're more than that," Sarah said. "You're patient, clear, and you make everyone feel capable. That's rare." In the afternoon, the real work began. Patricia started connecting the new parallel system to the actual sensor feeds and control mechanisms. This was the delicate part, where a wrong connection could cause problems with both the old and new systems. She worked slowly, carefully, checking each connection multiple times. Sarah assisted her, reading out wire numbers and holding cables while Patricia made connections. Bill and George checked her work, providing a second and third set of eyes. Daniel and Mike watched closely, offering suggestions and answering questions about the dam's specific quirks and characteristics. By late afternoon, all the hardware was installed. Patricia stepped back, looking at what they had accomplished. The new system was physically complete, wired into the dam's sensors and controls. Now came the critical part: testing. "We need to test everything without actually switching over control," Patricia said. "The new system will run in parallel with the old one, reading the same data and calculating what it would do, but not actually sending control signals yet. We'll watch both systems and make sure the new one makes the right decisions." They powered up the new system. Patricia's laptop displayed data from all the sensors: water levels, spillway positions, flow rates, pressure readings. The new system processed this data and displayed what actions it recommended. "Old system says spillway gate 3 should be at 45%, Mike read from the original control panel. "New system recommends 46%, Sarah read from Patricia's laptop. "That's within acceptable variation," Patricia said, making notes. "The new system is being slightly more conservative, which is fine." They watched for hours, comparing the two systems' responses to changing conditions. As evening came, the wind picked up and the first raindrops began to fall. The dam's sensors showed water levels rising slightly as streams fed more runoff into the reservoir. "The storm is starting early," Daniel said, checking his phone. "Weather Service just updated the forecast. We're going to get significant rain over the next few days." Patricia felt a spike of anxiety, but she pushed it down. "Then we need to make sure this system is working perfectly." Let's continue testing. They worked into the night. Patricia tested every possible scenario. What if a sensor failed? What if water levels rose rapidly? What if the power fluctuated? What if multiple things went wrong at once? For each scenario, she watched how her system responded, making small adjustments to the code when necessary. By midnight, she was satisfied. The new system was responding correctly to every test. It was time for the final decision. I think we're ready to switch over, Patricia said, though her voice was uncertain.
You think, or you know? Daniel asked gently. Patricia took a deep breath. I've tested everything I can think of. The system is responding correctly. The code is solid. The hardware is properly installed. But I can't guarantee perfection. Something unexpected could happen. Patricia, Mike said, we trust you. You've done excellent work, but you need to trust yourself too. Is this system ready? Patricia looked at her laptop, at the steady stream of data, at the consistent, sensible recommendations the system was making. She thought about all the safety checks she had built in, all the redundancies, all the careful engineering. Yes, she said finally, it's ready. Then let's do it, Daniel said. Patricia nodded to Sarah, who had been learning the system alongside her. On my mark, we'll transfer control from the old processor to the new system. The transfer should be seamless. If anything looks wrong, we can switch back immediately. Everyone was quiet, watching. Patricia's hands were steady as she typed commands into her laptop. Transferring control in 3, 2, 1, mark. She pressed enter. On her screen, status changed from monitoring to active. The new system was now in control of the dam's spillways. Everyone held their breath, watching the screens, listening to the equipment. The dam's spillway motors hummed as they adjusted position slightly. Water flow changed slightly. On Patricia's laptop, the system reported normal operation. Water level steady. Mike read from his instruments. Spillway positions optimal, Daniel confirmed. System status all green, Sarah said, reading Patricia's laptop screen. Patricia felt her shoulders relax slightly. The system was working. Her system was working. We're going to need continuous monitoring for the next 72 hours, Patricia said. Especially with the storm coming. I'm staying here. We'll take shifts, Daniel offered. Mike and I can cover nights. I'll stay too, Sarah said. Patricia, you need to sleep sometime. So do you, Patricia pointed out. You have kids to take care of. My ex-husband can handle a few nights, Sarah said firmly. This is important. They organized a monitoring schedule. Daniel and Mike would take the night shift. Patricia and Sarah would cover days. Tom and the others would provide support and supplies. The whole town was coming together to keep watch over the dam. Patricia tried to rest on a cot they had set up in a side room, but sleep wouldn't come. She kept thinking about the system, about what could go wrong, about the responsibility she had taken on. Finally, she gave up trying to sleep and went back to the control room. Can't rest? Daniel asked. He was sitting at the control panel, watching gauges and monitors. Too much adrenaline, Patricia admitted. Patricia, I've been an engineer for 20 years, Daniel said. I've seen a lot of systems, a lot of installations. What you did here in 3 days is remarkable. Most people couldn't have pulled this off in 3 weeks. I just did what needed to be done. That's the definition of a hero, Daniel said, with a small smile. Someone who does what needs to be done, even when they're scared. Patricia didn't feel like a hero. She felt like someone who had finally stopped running. But maybe that was a start. The rain outside intensified, drumming on the dam's structure. Patricia watched her laptop screen, watching the system respond to changing conditions. Water levels were rising, but slowly, predictably. The system adjusted spillway gates accordingly, maintaining safe levels. The night passed slowly. Patricia dozed in a chair, waking every half hour to check the monitors. By dawn, the rain was steady and heavy, but the dam was handling it well. Sarah arrived at 7 a.m. with breakfast and fresh coffee. "How are we doing?" "Good," Patricia said. "The system is performing exactly as designed. Water levels are up, but within normal parameters." "You look exhausted," Sarah observed. "I am," Patricia admitted. "But I'm also, I don't know, proud? Is that allowed?" Sarah smiled. "It's definitely allowed. Patricia, you should see the town. Everyone knows what you're doing. They're talking about you as the person who saved Millbrook." "I haven't saved anything yet. The storm isn't over. But you're trying. That's what matters." Tom arrived with more supplies and news from town. The heavy rain was causing some street flooding, but nothing serious. Everyone was staying indoors, keeping safe, trusting that the dam would hold. "The town council wants to thank you officially," Tom said. "They're talking about some kind of recognition ceremony after this is all over." "I don't need recognition," Patricia said quickly. "I'm just doing what I should have been doing all along." "Let people thank you," Tom said gently. "It's not about you needing it. It's about them needing to express gratitude. That's part of community." The day continued with steady rain. Patricia monitored the system constantly, making small adjustments to her code to optimize performance. The system was working well, but she saw opportunities to make it even better. By evening, the rain intensified further. The Weather Service issued a severe weather warning. The storm was going to be worse than initially predicted. "We're going to see peak flows in the next 12 to 18 hours, Mike said, studying weather data. "This is going to test the system." Patricia nodded grimly. "Then let's make sure we're ready. Sarah, help me double-check all the settings. Daniel, Mike, verify that all the manual overrides are working. If the automated system has any problems, we need to be able to take over manually immediately." They worked through the evening, preparing for the worst. Patricia reviewed her code one more time, looking for any weak points. She added additional logging to track exactly what the system was doing and why. Night fell, and the storm raged outside. The wind howled, the rain pounded, and the dam groaned under the pressure of rising water. Inside the control room, everyone was tense, watching monitors, ready to respond to any problem. "Water level rising faster now," Mike reported. "We're at 60% of capacity and climbing." Patricia watched her system respond. It was opening spillways in careful sequence, releasing water in controlled amounts to prevent dangerous buildup. Everything was working as designed. "Spillway 3 opening to 70%, the system reported. "Spillway 5 opening to 65%, the system reported. The releases were exactly what Patricia's calculations had predicted would be necessary. The system was doing its job. But then, at 11 p.m., an alarm sounded.
"Sensor 4 showing anomalous readings," Sarah called out, reading the laptop screen. Patricia rushed over. One of the water level sensors was giving inconsistent data, jumping between readings too rapidly to be real. "Sensor failure," Patricia said. "The system should automatically disregard that sensor and rely on the others." She watched as her code did exactly that. The system recognized the bad data, flagged the sensor as faulty, and recalculated based on the remaining sensors. The spillway adjustments continued without interruption. "System compensating correctly," Patricia confirmed. "This is exactly what we designed it to do." Everyone relaxed slightly. The test had worked. The system was robust enough to handle failures. But the storm wasn't done with them yet.
By midnight, the storm had intensified beyond anyone's predictions. The rain was torrential, the wind was gusting to 60 miles per hour, and water was pouring into the reservoir faster than Patricia had calculated. "We're at 75% capacity," Daniel announced, his voice tense, "and rising fast." Patricia's system was working hard, opening spillways wider, releasing more water. But there were physical limits to how fast water could be released safely. If they opened the spillways too wide too fast, The sudden surge could cause flooding downstream. If they didn't open them enough, the reservoir would overflow, which would be catastrophic. "How long until we reach critical levels?" Patricia asked. Mike did quick calculations. "At this rate of inflow, maybe 3 hours." 3 hours. Patricia looked at her laptop, watching the system make continuous adjustments. It was performing perfectly, but it was designed for normal storms, not this extreme weather. "We need to increase release rates," Patricia said. "But we need to do it carefully. Too much surge, and we flood the valley. Not enough, and we overflow the dam." She began adjusting parameters in her code, allowing the system to be more aggressive in its releases while still maintaining safety margins. It was a delicate balance, and every decision mattered. Sarah stood beside her, reading out data from the sensors. Water level at 78%. "Increasing spillway releases," Patricia said, typing rapidly. The spillway motors whined as they opened wider. The roar of released water grew louder. "We're at maximum safe release rates," Mike warned. "We can't open them much more without risking downstream flooding." Patricia understood. They were at the limit of what the system could safely do. Now it was a waiting game, hoping that the current release rate was enough to prevent overflow, hoping that the storm would ease before they ran out of options.
"Water level at 80%, Sarah called out. The rain continued to pound down. Patricia stood in the control room, watching her system work, feeling helpless. She had designed this system to handle normal conditions, even severe conditions. But this storm was extraordinary. "Can we manually open the spillways beyond safe parameters?" she asked Daniel. "Yes, but the downstream communities would flood. Not catastrophically, but there would be property damage, possible injuries." Patricia faced a terrible choice: risk overflow at the dam, which could be catastrophic for Millbrook, or release water so fast that downstream areas flooded, causing damage to other communities. "How many people live downstream?" Patricia asked. "About 5,000, Mike said. Scattered farms and small communities." "And how many in Millbrook?" 2,000. Patricia felt the weight of 7,000 lives in her hands. Whatever she decided, people could be hurt. Property could be damaged. This was her nightmare from 10 years ago, replayed in a different form. She had to make a decision that could harm people, no matter what she chose. "What does the system recommend?" Daniel asked quietly. Patricia looked at her laptop. The system had calculated optimal release rates based on all available data. It was recommending holding current spillway positions, riding out the storm, and accepting the risk of approaching capacity limits. "The system says maintain current rates," Patricia reported. "Do you trust it?" Mike asked. Patricia thought about the code she had written, the safety checks she had built in, the careful calculations. She thought about the days of testing, the conservative assumptions, the robust design. "Yes," Patricia said, "I trust it. But I want to prepare emergency procedures just in case." For the next hour, they prepared for every possibility. They contacted downstream communities, warning them of potential flooding. They prepared to open spillways to maximum if necessary. They had evacuation plans ready for Millbrook if the dam approached critical levels. Sarah helped Patricia set up additional monitoring, flagging any trend that showed things getting worse. Tom was on the phone coordinating with emergency services, making sure everyone was ready. "Water level at 83%, Sarah announced. The control room was tense. Everyone was watching monitors, tracking trends, calculating how much time they had left. Patricia stood at her laptop, her hands hovering over the keyboard, ready to make adjustments if needed. But for now, the system was doing everything right. It was just a question of whether it would be enough. At 1 a.m., something changed. The rain started to ease slightly. Not much, but enough to notice. Inflow rate decreasing, Mike said, checking his instruments. Everyone held their breath, watching, hoping. The water level continued to rise, but more slowly now. 85%, Sarah called out, but the rate of increase was slowing. The system was finally starting to catch up, releasing water almost as fast as it was coming in. Storm appears to be peaking, Daniel said, checking weather data. This might be the worst of it. They watched for another 30 minutes. The water level crept up to 87%, then held steady. The inflow and outflow were almost balanced. The dam was holding. I think we're through the worst, Patricia said cautiously, but we need to stay vigilant. The reservoir is still dangerously full. Over the next 2 hours, the rain gradually lessened. The water level held steady at 87%, occasionally ticking up to 88, but never going higher. The system continued to manage the spillways perfectly, maintaining the delicate balance. By 3 a.m., the rain had reduced to a light drizzle. The crisis was passing. Water level starting to drop, Mike announced. We're at 86%. A collective sigh of relief went through the control room. They had made it. The dam had held. Millbrook was safe. Patricia felt her legs go weak. She sat down heavily in a chair, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. She had been running on adrenaline and fear for hours, and now that the crisis was passing, she was crashing. You did it, Sarah said, putting a hand on Patricia's shoulder. Your system worked. We all did it, Patricia said weakly. Everyone helped. Daniel walked over and shook Patricia's hand. Patricia, I've worked on dozens of dams in my career. I've never seen anyone pull off what you just did. You designed, built, and tested a critical control system in 3 days, and it just saved thousands of lives. I was terrified the whole time, Patricia admitted. Good, Daniel said with a tired smile. If you weren't scared, I would have been worried about you. Over the next few hours, the water level continued to drop slowly as the system released water in controlled amounts. By dawn, they were down to 82% and still falling. The danger had passed. Tom arrived with breakfast and news from town. Everyone knows what happened up here last night. The whole town was listening to weather updates, watching the rain, praying that the dam would hold. They know you saved them, Patricia. Patricia was too tired to argue. She just nodded and ate her breakfast mechanically. Patricia, you should go home and rest, Sarah said. The crisis is over. We can monitor the system from here. I should stay, Patricia protested weakly. You've been awake for almost 48 hours, Helen said, appearing in the doorway. She had driven up to check on everyone. As your doctor, I'm ordering you to go home and sleep. The dam is fine. Your system is working. You've done everything you can. Patricia wanted to protest more, but she was too exhausted. If anything changes, we'll call you immediately, Daniel promised. Go home. You've earned rest. Sarah drove Patricia back to town. The rain had stopped, and the morning sun was breaking through the clouds. The streets of Millbrook were wet, but undamaged. People were starting to come outside, assessing the minor flooding in some areas, but mostly just relieved that the storm was over. Look, Sarah said, pointing. As they drove down Main Street, people were coming out of their houses. When they saw Patricia in the car, they waved. Some applauded. Tom was standing outside Betty's diner with a group of others, and they cheered as Patricia drove past. They're thanking you, Sarah said. Patricia felt tears welling up in her eyes. For 10 years, she had hidden from recognition, from responsibility, from connection with others. She had convinced herself that she didn't deserve gratitude or respect. that she was someone who caused harm, not someone who helped. But these people were thanking her, not for being perfect, not for never making mistakes, but for showing up, for trying, for doing her best when it mattered. Sarah pulled up to Patricia's house. Get some sleep. You're a hero, whether you want to accept it or not. Patricia went inside, took a long shower, and collapsed into bed. She slept for 12 hours straight, the deepest sleep she'd had in a decade. When she woke up, it was evening. She felt stiff and sore, but rested. She checked her phone and found dozens of messages from people in town, thanking her, congratulating her, expressing their gratitude. She also found a message from James, her old colleague. Somehow he had heard about what happened in Millbrook. Patricia, his message said, I heard what you did. I'm proud of you. You found your way back. Remember what I told you after the Guardian Protocol incident? You can't let one failure define you. You have to keep trying, keep helping, keep engineering. You've remembered that. Welcome back to the world. Patricia sat in her quiet house, reading that message over and over. Welcome back to the world. Yes, she thought. Maybe she was ready to be back.
The next few days were strange for Patricia. She had become a local celebrity, something she never wanted and didn't know how to handle. People stopped her on the street to thank her. The local newspaper ran a story about how local engineer saves town from flooding. The town council scheduled a special meeting to recognize her service. Patricia tried to decline the recognition, but Tom wouldn't let her. Patricia, these people need to thank you, Tom explained. Not for your sake, but for theirs. You gave them a gift, and they need to acknowledge it. That's how communities work. So Patricia reluctantly agreed to attend the council meeting. The community center was packed with people, more than she had ever seen there. The town council formally thanked her, presenting a certificate of appreciation that she accepted awkwardly. But then people started standing up to speak. Sarah talked about how grateful she was that her children were safe. Tom spoke about Patricia's quiet competence and hidden courage. Helen described Patricia's technical brilliance and careful preparation. One by one, people from the town stood and shared what Patricia's work had meant to them. They talked about their homes, their families, their lives that would have been disrupted or destroyed if the dam had failed. Patricia sat through it all, uncomfortable with the attention, but also deeply moved. These people's gratitude wasn't just about the dam. It was about community, about caring for each other, about showing up when needed. When the meeting ended, little Emma ran up to Patricia and hugged her legs. "Thank you for keeping us safe," Emma said simply. Patricia knelt down to Emma's level. "You're welcome, sweetheart. That's what engineers do. We try to keep people safe." "When I grow up, I want to be an engineer like you," Emma said. Patricia felt tears prickling at her eyes. This child wanted to be like her. After everything that had happened, after all her mistakes and failures, a child looked at her and saw someone worth emulating. "Then you'll be an excellent engineer," Patricia said, her voice thick with emotion. "Just remember to always put safety first, always double-check your work, and never be afraid to ask for help." In the days that followed, life slowly returned to normal. The county engineers completed the permanent repairs to the dam's control systems, replacing the old equipment with modern, reliable technology. Patricia's parallel system was kept in place as a backup, with the county paying her for the equipment and installation. Patricia reopened her repair shop, returning to her daily routine of fixing toasters and coffee makers. But something had changed. She was more open with customers, more willing to chat, more connected to the community. She accepted Sarah's invitations to dinner, joined the town book club that Helen belonged to, and even volunteered to help with the high school's science fair. She was slowly, carefully rebuilding her life, not as someone hiding from her past, but as someone learning to live with it. One afternoon, about a month after the storm, Daniel and Mike stopped by her shop. "Patricia, we have a proposition for you," Daniel said. "The county is impressed with your work. They want to hire you as a consulting engineer for dam safety assessments." Patricia's first instinct was to refuse, but she caught herself. "Tell me more," she said instead. "We have 20 dams in the region," Mike explained. "Most of them have aging control systems, like Clearwater did. We need someone with your expertise to assess them, identify problems, and design solutions. It would be part-time, contract work. You could still run your shop, but you'd be helping keep communities safe." Patricia thought about it carefully. "I'll need to set some conditions. I want full authority to implement any safety measures I deem necessary. I want regular training to keep my skills current. And I want a partner on each project, someone to double-check my work." "Done," Daniel said without hesitation. "Patricia, we trust you. But we also understand why you'd want those safeguards. That's what makes you the right person for this job." Patricia smiled. "Then I accept." She started the consulting work slowly, carefully. Her first project was assessing another old dam about 50 miles away. She worked with Mike as her partner, and they spent a week analyzing the system, identifying potential problems, and designing upgrades. It felt good to use her engineering skills for meaningful work again. More than good. It felt right. Over the following months, Patricia found a new balance in her life. She ran her repair shop, worked on dam safety projects, and became an active member of the Millbrook community. She was still cautious, still careful, still haunted sometimes by memories of the Guardian Protocol, but she had learned to live with her past instead of running from it. One evening, she was working late in her shop when Helen stopped by. "You look happy," Helen observed. "I think I am," Patricia said, surprised by the realization. "For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be." "You know what I've learned as a doctor?" Helen said. "Nobody gets through life without making mistakes. Some mistakes are bigger than others. But the people who matter, the people who make a difference, are the ones who learn from their mistakes and keep trying." Patricia thought about the Guardian Protocol, about the 10 years she had spent hiding, about the dam crisis that had forced her to stop running. "I'm trying," Patricia said. "I know," Helen replied with a warm smile. "We all see it." Patricia worked on several more dam projects over the next year. Each one was different, with unique challenges and problems to solve. She worked with different partners, always making sure someone was checking her work, always being transparent about her methods and reasoning. She also started mentoring young women interested in engineering. Emma's mother, Sarah, had asked if Patricia would talk to Emma's school about engineering careers. Patricia had hesitated, but then remembered Emma's words. "When I grow up, I want to be an engineer like you." She gave the talk, and it went well. The students were engaged, asking intelligent questions, showing genuine interest. Afterward, several girls approached her to learn more. Patricia found herself organizing a monthly engineering club, where she taught basic principles and worked on simple projects with interested students. One of her students was a high school senior named Maya, who was brilliant, but from a family that couldn't afford college. Patricia helped Maya apply for scholarships and wrote a powerful recommendation letter. When Maya got accepted to a top engineering program with full funding, Patricia felt a pride she hadn't experienced in years.
"You changed my life," Maya told her on the last day of school. "Before I met you, I thought engineering was something other people did. But you showed me that someone like me could do it too." Patricia realized that this was another form of making things better. Not just fixing dams or toasters, but helping people fix their own futures, opening doors that might otherwise stay closed. 2 years after the dam crisis, Patricia received an unexpected phone call. It was from a colonel in the military, someone from her old unit.
Ms. Moore, I hope I'm not disturbing you, the colonel said. I wanted to inform you that we're conducting a review of the Guardian Protocol incident from 10 years ago. We've uncovered new information about the modifications that were made to your system without your knowledge. We wanted to offer you a full, formal exoneration. Your role in the incident was entirely appropriate. The fault lay with those who modified your safety protocols without authorization. Patricia listened, feeling a mixture of emotions. Thank you for telling me. We'd also like to offer you your old position back, if you're interested, or a consulting role. The military could use someone with your expertise and ethics. Patricia thought about it for a moment. No, thank you. I appreciate the offer and the exoneration, but I've found where I belong. I'm doing work that matters, in a place I care about, with people I trust. I'm happy here. I understand, the colonel said. But if you ever change your mind, the door is open. And Miss Moore, what you did in Millbrook, saving that town, that's more important than anything you did here. You should be proud. After the call ended, Patricia sat in her shop thinking. She had spent 10 years believing she was a failure, believing she didn't deserve to do meaningful work, believing she should hide from responsibility. But she had been wrong. She wasn't defined by one failure, one incident, one mistake. She was defined by what she chose to do next, by how she responded to challenges, by whether she showed up when people needed her. She picked up her phone and called James. James, it's Patricia. I wanted to thank you. For what? James asked. For not giving up on me, for encouraging me all these years, for reminding me that one failure doesn't define a person. Patricia, you didn't need me. You found your own way back. I just believed in you until you could believe in yourself again. They talked for an hour, catching up, discussing engineering challenges, sharing stories. It felt good to reconnect with an old friend, to remember that she had a professional community beyond Millbrook. After the call, Patricia locked up her shop and walked home through the quiet streets of Millbrook. The evening was beautiful, with stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. She passed familiar houses, waved to neighbors, stopped to admire Tom's garden. This was her life now.
Not perfect, but real. Not without challenges, but full of purpose. Not hiding from her past, but building toward a future. 3 years after the dam crisis, Patricia's life had settled into a satisfying rhythm. Her repair shop was thriving, her consulting work with the county was meaningful, and her engineering club had grown to over 30 students. She had found her place in the world, not by forgetting her past, but by integrating it into a fuller, richer present. But the past wasn't quite finished with her yet. One morning, Patricia received an email from an international engineering organization. They were hosting a conference on infrastructure safety and wanted her to give a keynote speech about the Clearwater Dam project. They had heard about her rapid response system and wanted her to share her approach with engineers from around the world.
Patricia's first instinct was to decline. Public speaking, especially to a large audience of professional engineers, was outside her comfort zone. But she thought about Maya and her other students, about the importance of sharing knowledge, about how her silence 10 years ago might have contributed to her isolation. She accepted the invitation. Preparing for the speech was challenging. Patricia had to organize her thoughts, create presentations, and practice speaking to an audience. Sarah helped her practice, offering feedback on her delivery. Helen helped her manage her anxiety about public speaking. Tom encouraged her to tell not just the technical story, but the personal one. People need to hear about more than just engineering solutions, Tom advised. They need to hear about courage, about overcoming fear, about second chances. That's what your story really is. The conference was held in a large city, far from Millbrook. Patricia flew there feeling nervous but determined. The conference center was huge, filled with hundreds of engineers from dozens of countries. She felt small and intimidated. But when she stepped onto the stage to give her speech, something changed. She looked out at the audience and saw people who shared her passion for engineering, who cared about safety, who wanted to learn and improve. They were her community, even if she had been apart from them for years. She started by telling the technical story of the Clearwater Dam project. She explained the challenge, described her parallel control system, discussed the design decisions and safety protocols. The engineers in the audience nodded along, understanding the technical complexity. But then she did something unexpected. She told them about the Guardian Protocol. She explained what had happened 10 years ago, how her system had been modified and failed, how people had been hurt. She talked about the guilt she had carried, the years spent hiding, the fear that had paralyzed her. "I made a mistake," Patricia said to the silent audience. "Not in my engineering, but in my response to failure. I let fear win. I stopped doing meaningful work because I was terrified of making another mistake. But that fear didn't protect anyone. It just meant I wasn't there to help when I was needed." She talked about the dam crisis, about being forced to overcome her fear, about choosing to try even when failure was possible. "Engineering isn't just about calculations and systems," Patricia said. "It's about courage. It's about doing your best work when the stakes are highest. It's about accepting that we can't guarantee perfection, but we can guarantee our full commitment to safety and excellence." She spoke for 45 minutes, and when she finished, the audience stood and applauded. Several engineers approached her afterward with questions, wanting to discuss technical details. Others thanked her for sharing her personal story. One older engineer, a woman in her 70s, took Patricia aside. "Thank you," the woman said. "I had a similar failure early in my career. It nearly ended my work as an engineer. I've never talked about it publicly, but hearing your story makes me think maybe I should. Maybe other young engineers need to hear that failure doesn't mean the end." Patricia realized that her story might help others who were struggling with similar fears and failures, that by being honest about her own journey, she might make the path easier for someone else. After the conference, Patricia returned to Millbrook feeling energized. She had reconnected with the broader engineering community, made new professional contacts, and shared knowledge that might help improve infrastructure safety in other places. But more importantly, she had proven to herself that she could face her past publicly, could talk about her failure without shame, could use her experience to help others. Back in Millbrook, life continued. Patricia's repair shop remained busy. Her dam safety work expanded to neighboring counties, and her engineering club welcomed its largest group of new students yet. One Saturday morning, Emma, now 10 years old and still fascinated by engineering, came to the shop with a school project. "Patricia, I have to design a simple machine for science class," Emma explained. "Can you help me?" Patricia smiled. "What kind of machine are you thinking about?" "Something that helps people," Emma said seriously, "like what you do." They spent the morning working together on a design for a simple mechanical device that could help elderly people reach high shelves safely. Emma's ideas were creative, and Patricia helped her refine them into something practical and buildable. As they worked, Patricia realized this was exactly what she was meant to do. Not just designing big systems or responding to crises, but passing on knowledge, encouraging the next generation, helping young people see themselves as problem solvers and helpers. "Emma, what made you want to be an engineer?" Patricia asked. Emma thought for a moment. "You did. When the big storm came, you weren't scared. You just fixed the problem. I want to be like that. I want to fix things and help people." "I was very scared," Patricia corrected gently, "but I did it anyway." That's what courage really is. Not being unafraid, but doing what needs to be done even when you're afraid. Emma nodded seriously, absorbing this lesson. That evening, Patricia had dinner at Sarah's house. Emma's younger brother Jack was there too, along with Sarah's new partner, a teacher from the high school. It was a warm family atmosphere. and Patricia realized she was part of this family in an informal way. "Patricia, I wanted to tell you something," Sarah said after dinner. "I've decided to go back to school. I'm getting a master's degree in education, focusing on STEM education. You inspired me." "Me?" Patricia was surprised. "Watching you work with the engineering club, seeing how you mentor those kids, it made me realize I want to do more in education. I want to help create programs that encourage girls and underrepresented kids to pursue science and engineering."
Patricia felt a warm glow of pride. Her influence was rippling outward in ways she never expected. "That's wonderful, Sarah. If you need any help with your program design, I'm happy to contribute." Over the next few months, Patricia and Sarah collaborated on developing a new STEM education program for the county schools. They combined Patricia's technical expertise with Sarah's educational training to create a curriculum that was both rigorous and accessible. The program launched the following school year, reaching hundreds of students across multiple schools. Patricia trained teachers, helped design hands-on projects, and occasionally guest lectured. She found that she loved teaching, loved seeing young minds grasp complex concepts, loved opening up possibilities. One day, she received an email from Maya, her former student who had gone to college on scholarship. Maya was in her junior year now, studying civil engineering. "Patricia," Maya wrote, "I wanted to tell you that I've chosen to focus on infrastructure safety for my senior project. You showed me how important it is, how engineering isn't just about building new things, but also maintaining and improving what we have. I want to do work like yours. I want to help keep communities safe." Patricia replied with encouragement and offered to advise Maya's senior project remotely. Over the following months, they exchanged emails regularly, discussing technical challenges, career advice, and the responsibilities of being an engineer. 4 years after the dam crisis, Patricia received another surprising call. It was from the governor's office. The state was establishing a new infrastructure safety task force, and they wanted Patricia to be a member. The task force would advise the state on maintaining and upgrading aging infrastructure across the region. Patricia accepted. It was a significant commitment, requiring travel to the state capital for monthly meetings and occasional site visits to infrastructure projects around the state. But it was also an opportunity to make a broader impact, to help shape policy and prioritize safety. At her first task force meeting, Patricia met engineers, policymakers, and community representatives from across the state. She was surprised to find that several people already knew about her work in Millbrook. "You're the engineer who saved that town from flooding," one task force member said. "Your rapid response system has been cited in several infrastructure safety reports. It's considered a model for emergency interventions." Patricia realized that her work had influenced thinking beyond just Millbrook, beyond just the few dams she had personally worked on. Her approach, her methods, her emphasis on safety and redundancy were being studied and emulated. During the task force discussions, Patricia found herself advocating for increased infrastructure funding, better maintenance protocols, and more attention to aging systems. She spoke from experience, describing the dangers of deferred maintenance and the importance of proactive interventions. "We can't wait for crises to respond," Patricia told the task force. "We need to identify problems before they become emergencies, invest in preventive maintenance, and plan for long-term sustainability. It's cheaper and safer to fix things before they break than to rebuild after disasters." Her arguments were persuasive, backed by technical expertise and real-world experience. The task force incorporated many of her recommendations into their final report to the governor. 5 years after the dam crisis, Millbrook held a celebration of the anniversary. The town had officially designated the day of the storm as Resilience Day, a commemoration of the community coming together during a crisis. Patricia was asked to give a speech at the celebration. This time, she didn't hesitate to accept. Standing in front of the assembled community, looking at familiar faces that had become friends and neighbors, Patricia reflected on her journey. 5 years ago, I was hiding, Patricia said. I had given up on meaningful work because I was afraid of failing again. But this community didn't let me hide. When you needed help, you asked for it. When I was scared, you supported me. When I succeeded, you celebrated with me. You taught me that we're not meant to face challenges alone. She talked about the value of community, the importance of asking for help, and the courage required to try even when success isn't guaranteed. I came to Millbrook as someone running from her past, Patricia said. I leave this stage as someone who has found her future. Thank you for giving me a second chance. Thank you for reminding me why I became an engineer. Thank you for being my home. The audience applauded, and many people were crying, including Patricia herself. After the celebration, Tom approached her. Patricia, I have something to tell you. I'm writing a book about the dam crisis and about your work here. I wanted to ask your permission. Patricia's first instinct was to say no, to protect her privacy. But then she thought about Maya, about Emma, about all the young engineers who might benefit from hearing this story. Yes, Patricia said. On one condition. Make sure the book emphasizes that the real story is about overcoming fear, about community, and about second chances, not just about engineering heroics. That's exactly the story I want to tell, Tom agreed. 6 years after the dam crisis, Patricia's life was full in ways she never imagined during those years of hiding. She had her repair shop, her consulting work, her teaching, her task force responsibilities, and her community connections. She was busy, sometimes overwhelmed, but deeply satisfied. She had also maintained her old friendship with James, who visited Millbrook occasionally. During one visit, James and Patricia drove up to look at Clearwater Dam. You built a good life here, James observed, as they stood looking at the dam. I did, Patricia agreed. It took me a long time to understand that failure isn't the end of the story. It's just a chapter. Maybe not even the most important chapter. What's the most important chapter? James asked. Patricia thought about the past 6 years, about the dam crisis, about her students, about the community she had found. The most important chapter is what you do next, Patricia said, after the failure, after the fear, after the hiding. The most important chapter is when you decide to try again. 7 years after the dam crisis, Maya graduated from college with honors. She had been recruited by several engineering firms, but chose to work for the county, doing infrastructure safety work similar to what Patricia did. She wanted to stay in the region, wanted to serve communities, wanted to make a difference. I want to be like you, Maya told Patricia at her graduation party. Then be better than me, Patricia replied. Learn from my mistakes without having to make them yourself. Be brave earlier than I was. Trust yourself sooner than I did. You have the talent and the training. Just don't forget the most important thing. What's that? Maya asked. Engineering is about people, Patricia said. Every system you design, every structure you build, every problem you solve, it's ultimately about keeping people safe and improving lives. Never forget that. Maya nodded seriously. I won't forget. 8 years after the dam crisis, Tom published his book. It was titled, The Second Chance: One Engineer's Journey from Failure to Hope. The book told Patricia's story, but it also told the story of Millbrook, of community resilience, of the importance of infrastructure maintenance. The book was moderately successful, read primarily by engineers and people interested in infrastructure issues. But it had an impact beyond its sales numbers. Several engineering schools began using it in their ethics courses, discussing the responsibility of engineers and the importance of learning from failures. Patricia received letters from engineers around the world who had read the book and been inspired by her story. Some shared their own failures and fears. Others thanked her for being honest about the challenges of the profession. A few young women wrote to say that her story had encouraged them to pursue engineering despite their doubts. One letter particularly moved Patricia. It was from an engineer who had been involved in a bridge collapse that killed several people. He had left engineering afterward, unable to cope with the guilt and trauma. But reading Patricia's story made him consider whether he might be able to find a way back to meaningful work. "Your story gave me hope," he wrote. "Not that I can erase what happened, but that I might someday be able to move forward while still honoring the weight of responsibility I carry." Patricia replied to his letter personally, sharing resources for therapy and support, encouraging him to take his time, reminding him that healing wasn't linear, but was possible. 9 years after the dam crisis, Patricia was 59 years old. She was thinking about retirement, though not seriously yet. She still loved her work, loved her community, loved the satisfaction of fixing things and helping people. Emma was now 18 and applying to colleges for engineering programs. Patricia wrote her a recommendation letter and helped her prepare for interviews. "I'm nervous," Emma admitted. "What if I'm not good enough? What if I fail?" "You will fail sometimes," Patricia said honestly. "Every engineer does. Every person does. The question isn't whether you'll fail, but how you'll respond to failure. Will you learn from it? Will you keep trying? Will you use it to become better?" "Like you did?" Emma asked. "I hope so," Patricia said. "I'm still learning, still growing, still trying to be better." That never stops. Emma got accepted to her top choice school with a substantial scholarship. At her high school graduation, she gave a speech thanking her teachers and mentors, specifically mentioning Patricia. "Ms. Moore taught me that engineering isn't just about math and science," Emma said in her speech. "It's about courage, community, and caring about people. She showed me that the best engineers are the ones who never stop trying to help others." Patricia, sitting in the audience, cried quietly with pride. 10 years after the dam crisis, Millbrook organized a major celebration. The town had officially designated Patricia as an honorary citizen, a recognition given to people who had made exceptional contributions to the community. Patricia stood on the stage where she had spoken at the Resilience Day celebration 5 years earlier, looking out at a community that had become her family. "10 years ago," Patricia said, "I stood in a control room, terrified that I was making a mistake, terrified that I would fail, terrified that people would be hurt because of me. I was right to be scared. The stakes were high, and failure would have been catastrophic." She paused, looking at the familiar faces in the audience. "But I tried anyway. Not because I was brave, but because all of you needed me to try. And in trying, in facing my fears, in doing the best work I could do, I found something I had lost 10 years before. I found my purpose. I found my community. I found myself." Patricia talked about the journey, about the lessons learned, about the importance of second chances. "We all carry failures with us," Patricia concluded. "We all have moments we wish we could change, decisions we regret, harm we've caused even unintentionally. The question is, will we let those failures define us, or will we let them teach us?" She looked at Emma in the audience, at Maya standing with other young engineers, at Sarah and Helen and Tom and all the people who had supported her journey. "I choose to be taught," Patricia said. "I choose to keep trying. I choose to believe in second chances. Thank you, Millbrook, for giving me mine."
15 years after the dam crisis, Patricia was 65 years old and officially retired from active engineering work. She had closed her repair shop, though she occasionally fixed things for neighbors as a favor. She had completed her term on the State Infrastructure Task Force. She had handed over her dam consulting work to Maya, who had become an excellent engineer in her own right. But Patricia wasn't inactive. She spent her time mentoring young engineers, teaching occasional classes at the local community college, and writing a book about infrastructure safety for non-engineers. She wanted to help people understand why infrastructure maintenance mattered, why engineers did what they did, and why supporting these systems was essential for community safety. Emma had graduated from engineering school and was working for a firm that designed water management systems. She visited Millbrook regularly and always stopped by to see Patricia, bringing stories of her projects and seeking advice. "I'm working on a dam project," Emma told Patricia during one visit. "It's my first major responsibility, and I'm terrified." Patricia smiled. "Good. That fear will keep you careful. Trust your training, check your work, ask for help when you need it, and remember that you're doing this to help people." "What if I fail?" Emma asked. "Then you'll learn, you'll grow, and you'll try again," Patricia said. "That's what engineers do. We solve problems, and sometimes the first solution doesn't work, so we find a second solution, or a third. The only real failure is giving up." Emma hugged her. "Thank you for teaching me that." Patricia's book was published when she was 67. It was titled Infrastructure and Us: Understanding the Systems That Keep Communities Safe. It was written for a general audience, explaining complex engineering concepts in accessible language, using stories and examples to illustrate why infrastructure maintenance mattered. The book was well received, particularly by policymakers and community leaders who needed to understand infrastructure issues to make informed decisions. Several state and local governments began using it as a resource for public education about infrastructure funding and maintenance priorities. At 70 years old, Patricia was invited to give another keynote speech at an international engineering conference. This time, the topic was Lessons from a Career in Infrastructure Safety. She talked about the Guardian Protocol, about the dam crisis, about the years in between. She talked about failure and recovery, about fear and courage, about the responsibility that comes with expertise. "I've made mistakes," Patricia told the audience of engineers. "Some were technical errors that I corrected. Some were judgment calls that didn't work out as planned. And one was a catastrophic failure that hurt people and changed my life." She paused, letting that sink in. "But the biggest mistake I made wasn't in my engineering. It was in giving up. It was in letting fear convince me that I shouldn't try to help people anymore. It was in believing that one failure meant I had nothing left to offer." She talked about second chances, about communities that support each other, about the importance of continuing to try even after failure. "We are engineers," Patricia said. "We solve problems. Sometimes we fail. But we keep trying. We keep learning. We keep improving. That's not just our profession. It's our calling." The speech received a standing ovation. Afterward, dozens of engineers approached Patricia to thank her, to share their own stories of failure and recovery, to express appreciation for her honesty and courage. One young engineer, a woman who reminded Patricia of herself decades ago, asked for advice. "I made a significant error on a project," the young engineer confided. "Nobody was hurt, but the system didn't perform as designed. I'm thinking about leaving engineering. I don't know if I can trust myself anymore." Patricia took the young woman's hands and looked into her eyes.
"Here's what I learned," Patricia said. "Mistakes don't disqualify you from this work. They educate you for it. Every error you make, if you learn from it, makes you better at what you do. The engineers I trust most aren't the ones who claim to never fail. They're the ones who acknowledge their failures, learn from them, and become more careful and thoughtful because of them. But what if I fail again? The young engineer asked. You will, Patricia said simply. We all do. But each failure teaches you something new, adds another layer of caution to your work, makes you ask better questions. The key is to never stop learning, never stop improving, never stop caring about getting it right. The young engineer thanked her, looking slightly less frightened and slightly more determined. Patricia continued to mentor young engineers for the rest of her life. She corresponded with dozens of them, offering advice, encouragement, and perspective. She established a scholarship fund for students from disadvantaged backgrounds who wanted to study engineering, particularly women and minorities who were underrepresented in the field. On Patricia's 75th birthday, Millbrook organized a celebration in her honor. The community center was packed with people from all phases of her life, old colleagues from her military days, including James, engineers she had worked with on dam projects, students she had mentored, including Emma and Maya, and neighbors and friends from Millbrook. Tom, now in his 90s but still sharp, gave a speech about Patricia's impact on the community. Patricia came to us as a stranger, Tom said. Someone running from her past, hiding in our small town, keeping to herself. But when we needed her, she showed up. She faced her fears, used her expertise, and saved us all. But more than that, she stayed. She became part of our community. She taught our children. She fixed our appliances. She made Millbrook better in 1,000 small ways and one very big way. Helen spoke about Patricia's courage and integrity. Sarah talked about Patricia's mentorship and friendship. Emma, now a successful engineer in her 30s with her own engineering consulting firm, spoke about how Patricia had shaped her career and her life. Ms. Moore taught me that engineering is about more than technical skills, Emma said. It's about serving others, about taking responsibility, about having the courage to try even when you're afraid. She taught me that failure isn't the end of the story, just a chapter. And she taught me that the best engineers are the ones who never stop learning and growing. Maya, who had taken over Patricia's dam safety consulting work and expanded it into a successful firm, gave a speech about Patricia's professional legacy. Patricia developed methods and approaches that have influenced infrastructure safety work across the entire region, Maya said. Her emphasis on redundancy, her careful testing protocols, her conservative safety margins, these have become standard practice. But beyond the technical contributions, she taught us about the ethics of engineering. She taught us that our work has real consequences for real people, and we must never forget that responsibility. Finally, Patricia stood to speak. She looked out at the crowd of people who had become her family, her community, her legacy. I came to Millbrook 25 years ago as a broken person, Patricia said. I was running from failure, from responsibility, from myself. I thought that by hiding, by doing small, safe work, I could protect myself and others from my potential to cause harm. She smiled at the memory of her younger, more fearful self. But you wouldn't let me hide. When you needed me, you asked for help. When I was scared, you encouraged me. When I succeeded, you celebrated with me. You taught me that we're not meant to face life alone, that community means supporting each other through failures and successes, that courage isn't the absence of fear, but action despite fear. Patricia's voice grew stronger. I've had a long career and I've made mistakes. I've had failures and successes, but the most important thing I've done is keep trying, keep showing up, keep using my skills to help others. That's the legacy I hope to leave. Not a perfect record, but a persistent effort. Not an absence of failure, but a refusal to let failure be the final word. The audience stood and applauded. Many were crying, including Patricia herself. After the celebration, as people were leaving, little Emma's daughter, now 7 years old, and also named Emma after her grandmother's friend, approached Patricia. "Ms. Patricia," young Emma said, "my mommy says you're a hero." "Are you really a hero?" Patricia knelt down to the child's level, just as she had done with the first Emma so many years ago. "I'm just someone who tried to help," Patricia said. "That's what heroes really are. Not people without fear, but people who help others even when they're scared." "I want to be a hero like you," young Emma said. Patricia smiled. "Then remember this. Be kind, be brave, keep learning, and when people need help, show up. That's all it takes." Patricia lived to be 82 years old. She remained active and engaged with her community until near the end of her life. She continued to mentor young engineers, correspond with students, and contribute to discussions about infrastructure safety and engineering ethics. When she died peacefully in her sleep, the entire town of Millbrook mourned. Her memorial service was held in the community center, and it was standing room only. Engineers came from across the state and country. Former students shared stories of her mentorship. Community members talked about her kindness, her wisdom, her quiet competence. The town established the Patricia Moore Memorial Scholarship for students pursuing engineering education. They renamed the community center the Patricia Moore Community Center. And at Clearwater Dam, they installed a plaque that read, "In honor of Patricia Moore, engineer and hero who taught us that courage means showing up when needed, that failure teaches more than success, and that every person deserves a second chance." Final reflections. Years after Patricia's passing, her influence continued to ripple outward through the lives she had touched. Emma became one of the leading water resource engineers in the country, known for her innovative approaches to dam safety and her commitment to mentoring young women in engineering. She often spoke at conferences about the lessons she learned from Patricia, always emphasizing the importance of ethical responsibility and community service. Maya's consulting firm grew to employ over 50 engineers, specializing in infrastructure safety across multiple states. She established company policies requiring peer review of all major decisions, redundant safety checks, and transparent communication with communities. These policies were directly inspired by Patricia's careful, methodical approach to engineering. The engineering club that Patricia started in Millbrook continued for decades, producing dozens of engineers, scientists, and technical professionals. Many of them returned to serve their communities, remembering Patricia's lesson that expertise comes with responsibility. Sarah completed her doctorate in STEM education and became a national advocate for improving science and engineering education in rural communities. She developed programs that reached thousands of students, always crediting Patricia as the inspiration for her work. Tom's book about Patricia remained in print and was eventually adapted into a documentary film that aired on public television. The film introduced Patricia's story to a broader audience, inspiring conversations about infrastructure safety, engineering ethics, and the importance of second chances. The State Infrastructure Task Force that Patricia had served on implemented many of her recommendations, leading to improved maintenance of dams, bridges, and other critical systems across the region. Several potential disasters were averted because of the proactive inspection and repair protocols that Patricia had advocated for. Helen continued practicing medicine in Millbrook for another decade after Patricia's death, often telling her patients stories about her friend's courage and determination. She used Patricia's example to encourage others facing their own fears and setbacks, showing them that recovery and redemption were possible. The Guardian Protocol incident, which had defined Patricia's life for so long, was eventually re-examined by military historians and ethics scholars. Patricia's careful documentation of her safety protocols and the unauthorized modifications that led to the failure became a case study in engineering schools worldwide. Her story taught future engineers about the importance of maintaining design integrity and speaking up when safety protocols are compromised. 20 years after Patricia's death, Clearwater Dam underwent a major renovation. The county invited Maya to oversee the project, and she incorporated many of the principles Patricia had taught her. During the renovation, they discovered Patricia's original parallel control system, still installed as a backup after all those years. It had never needed to activate again, but it had remained there, a silent guardian, a testament to Patricia's careful engineering. Maya decided to preserve some of Patricia's original equipment in a small museum dedicated to infrastructure history. Visitors could see the microcontrollers Patricia had programmed, the hand-drawn diagrams she had sketched, and the detailed notes she had made during that critical week. School groups came to learn about engineering, about problem solving, and about a woman who had faced her fears to save her community. The museum included a video oral history project featuring interviews with people who had known Patricia, colleagues from her military days, engineers she had worked with, students she had mentored, and Millbrook residents whose lives she had touched. These interviews painted a complex picture of a person who was brilliant but humble, skilled but always learning, confident in her expertise but never arrogant. One interview particularly captured Patricia's essence. It was with James, her old colleague, recorded shortly before his own death. "Patricia was the best engineer I ever worked with," James said in the interview. "Not because she never made mistakes, she did, but because she learned from every mistake, grew from every challenge, and never lost sight of why we do this work. We engineer systems to protect people, to improve lives, to make the world safer." Patricia understood that in her bones. Even when she was scared, even when she doubted herself, she never forgot that fundamental purpose. Another powerful interview was with the young engineer Patricia had spoken to at the conference, the one who had been considering leaving the profession after a significant error. That woman had gone on to become a leading expert in structural safety, and she credited Patricia's advice with giving her the courage to continue. "Patricia told me that mistakes don't disqualify you from engineering, they educate you for it," the woman said in her interview. "That conversation changed my life. I realized that my error, as painful as it was, had taught me lessons I could never have learned any other way. I became more careful, more thoughtful, more humble. I became a better engineer because I had failed and learned from it." The museum also displayed letters Patricia had received from people whose lives she had touched. There were thank you notes from students, professional correspondence with colleagues, and messages from community members expressing gratitude. One letter, yellowed with age, was from a young girl named Emma, who had written to Patricia after the dam crisis. "Dear Ms. Moore," the childish handwriting read, "Thank you for keeping my family safe. When I grow up, I want to fix things and help people, just like you. You are my hero. Love, Emma." Below the letter was a photograph of adult Emma receiving an award for engineering excellence, standing at a podium with a large smile, clearly explaining her work with the same enthusiasm she had shown as a child watching Patricia repair a vacuum cleaner. The museum became a popular destination for school field trips and engineering students. It served as a reminder that behind every infrastructure system, every bridge, every dam, every building, there were people. Engineers who cared about safety, who worked diligently to protect communities, who faced difficult decisions and sometimes made mistakes, but who kept trying to do better. 30 years after Patricia's death, Millbrook celebrated its bicentennial. The town had grown some, but retained its character as a close-knit mountain community. At the celebration, a new statue was unveiled in the town square. It depicted Patricia wearing practical work clothes, holding blueprints in one hand and a wrench in the other, looking determined but approachable. The statue's base bore an inscription with Patricia's own words, taken from a speech she had given to engineering students late in her life. Engineering is not about being perfect. It is about being persistent. It is about showing up, doing your best work, learning from mistakes, and never giving up on trying to make things better. We are builders and fixers, problem solvers and protectors. We carry a great responsibility, and we must carry it with humility, care, and courage. At the unveiling ceremony, the current mayor of Millbrook spoke about Patricia's legacy. Patricia Moore came to our town as a stranger seeking refuge, the mayor said. She left us as a beloved friend who had saved us, taught us, and inspired us. Her legacy isn't just the dam system that still protects our community. It's the engineers she trained, the students she inspired, the lessons she taught about courage and second chances. Patricia showed us that our past doesn't define our future. Our choices do. Young people in the audience, many of whom had never met Patricia, listened intently. They had grown up hearing stories about her, learning from her example, benefiting from the scholarship fund she established. Patricia had become part of Millbrook's collective memory, a standard of excellence and integrity that inspired each new generation. One young woman in the audience, a high school senior planning to study engineering, looked at the statue thoughtfully. She didn't know that in her own life she would face challenges and setbacks, would doubt herself, and struggle with difficult decisions. She didn't know that someday she would remember this moment, remember the story of Patricia Moore, and draw strength from knowing that someone else had faced similar fears and found the courage to keep trying. That was Patricia's true legacy. Not just the systems she designed or the disasters she prevented, but the inspiration she provided to countless others to face their fears, to learn from failures, and to use their talents in service of others. The story of Patricia Moore, military engineer, repair shop owner, dam savior, mentor, teacher, and friend, was ultimately a story about what it means to be human. It was about making mistakes and finding redemption, about carrying guilt and learning forgiveness, about hiding from the world and finding the courage to rejoin it, about using our talents not for glory, but for service. In the years that followed, as Millbrook and the world changed, as technology advanced and new challenges emerged, Patricia's fundamental lessons remained relevant. That expertise comes with responsibility. That fear can be a tool rather than an obstacle. That failure is a teacher, not a judge. That community matters. That second chances are possible, and that the only true failure is giving up. Engineers around the world continued to study her work, not just her technical innovations, but her ethical approach to the profession. Her emphasis on redundancy, safety, transparency, and humility became touchstones for best practices in infrastructure engineering. But perhaps her greatest impact was on the individuals whose lives she touched directly. The students she mentored carried her lessons into their own work, teaching others what they had learned, creating a ripple effect that extended far beyond what Patricia could have imagined. Emma, now in her 50s and near the end of her own distinguished career, often spoke at engineering schools. She always included the story of how a repair shop owner in a small mountain town had inspired her to become an engineer, had shown her that engineering was about more than calculations and blueprints. It was about caring for people and communities. Patricia Moore taught me that being an engineer means being a guardian, Emma would say. We guard against failures, against disasters, against harm. We guard the safety of communities we may never meet, the lives of people who will never know our names. That's not a burden. It's a privilege. And Patricia showed me how to carry that privilege with humility and courage. In the end, Patricia's story was proof that redemption is possible. that people can change, that past failures don't have to define future possibilities. She had spent 10 years believing she had nothing left to offer, believing she should hide from responsibility, believing she was broken beyond repair. But she had been wrong. She wasn't broken. She was healing. She wasn't useless. She was preparing. She wasn't defined by her failure. She was being shaped by her response to it. Patricia Moore had come to Millbrook broken and afraid. She had left it decades later, whole and brave. Not because she had erased her past, but because she had integrated it into a fuller, richer, more meaningful life. And in doing so, she had shown countless others that they could do the same. The repair shop she had once run was now a cafe, but the building still bore a small plaque. Former site of Moore's Fix-It, where Patricia Moore fixed not only appliances, but also her own spirit, and in doing so, saved a town and inspired a generation. Clearwater Dam still stood, holding back millions of gallons of water, protecting Millbrook and the valley below. Modern control systems had replaced Patricia's parallel system and the original SCADA equipment. But the fundamental purpose remained the same: to keep people safe, to manage resources wisely, to serve communities. On quiet evenings, when the sun set behind the mountains and the dam spillways caught the golden light, it was easy to imagine Patricia there, checking systems, running tests, making sure everything was working correctly. Her presence lingered not as a ghost, but as an inspiration, a reminder of what one person could do when they found the courage to try. The water flowed, the town thrived, the students learned, the engineers built, and life continued. Patricia's story became part of the larger human story, the eternal cycle of falling and rising, breaking and healing, failing and trying again. In engineering schools, students learned her technical innovations. In ethics courses, they discussed her choices and decisions. In personal development seminars, they heard about her journey from trauma to triumph. But the most important lesson, the one that transcended any single field or discipline, was this: it is never too late to start again. It is never too late to face your fears. It is never too late to use your gifts to help others. And it is never too late to become the person you were always meant to be. Patricia Moore had learned that lesson the hard way, through years of hiding and a crisis that forced her to emerge. But once learned, she had lived it fully, generously sharing it with everyone she met. And so her story lived on, not just in museums and books, not just in the systems she designed and the communities she protected, but in the hearts and minds of everyone who heard it and thought, if she could do it, maybe I can too. That was Patricia's greatest engineering achievement. Not a dam system or a control protocol, but the architecture of hope she built in human hearts. She had shown that failure is not final, that fear can be overcome, that redemption is real, and that every person deserves a second chance. The sun set on Millbrook, casting long shadows across the town square where Patricia's statue stood. The inscription on the base remained, a permanent reminder of the woman who had saved them all. Engineering is not about being perfect. It is about being persistent. And in the gathering dusk, as lights came on in houses and the town settled in for the evening, Patricia's legacy continued. In the engineers she inspired, the communities she protected, the students she taught, and the countless people who found courage in her story.
She had come to Millbrook to hide. She had stayed to help, and in helping, she had found herself again. That was the second chance. That was the story. That was the life of Patricia Moore, engineer, hero, teacher, friend, and proof that it is never too late to become who you were always meant to be. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to hear what inspired you the most, and where in the world are you watching from? Let us know below.